According to Tom Rainer, the majority of Protestant churches in America average 10 or less salvations a year. Let's change the stat.
Welcome to GoCast, a podcast designed to inspire and equip pastors and leaders to lead soul-winning churches. We have a mission to go and make disciples. This is GoCast.
Hey everyone, welcome to GoCast. I'm your host, Kelly Stickle, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Tim Tribble. Today we have a great episode. Again, this is a part of an extension of season 1 as we get ready for GoCast season 2 coming March 1st, and very, very excited about that and navigating this crazy COVID season all of that. But during COVID, did this interview with a great friend of mine, Justin Beesley, who pastors HopeCity Church in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And this conversation is awesome. Justin's very inspiring, great preacher, very inspiring young man who's took over his church from his dad, so had to go through a transition, navigating that. We talk a little bit about that and transitions. But he also is pastoring a large, fast-growing church in the Maritimes, which is, Canada is very... typical small church, difficult place to pastor, but the Maritimes probably accentuates that just a little bit more.
Place, yeah.
It's a different place, and it's even harder for churches to grow, especially to grow large. And yet he has breaking all the trends and done that. So as we get into that, we're going to hear a little bit about how he did that and how he navigated a transition and pastoring in difficult places. I think all of us leaders, pastors, feel like we're pastoring something difficult, but is there something that in particular comes to mind that is maybe a challenge that you thought, this is difficult, that you've had to kind of navigate through?
Well, if I were to look recently, after doing, music ministry for a considerable amount of time, we just recently were asked by a very reputable person to go into children's ministry and the family ministry side of things. And so for my wife and I, as excited we were for a new challenge, it came with its share of new perspective and trying to understand the ministry side of things, but also not just understanding where it's at, but where do we take it from where it's at? And how do we work along with the amazing people that are already in the department and take it to the next level. So it pushed against some of my trains of thoughts for sure, and completely blew my expectations out of the water, or my perceived expectations of it anyways.
So what in that transition, it is recent. I mean, COVID even, we asked you to transition there and go through that. So it's not the easiest ministry to grow on its own normally.
Right.
But add COVID on top of it. So what have you learned in this challenge?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing is my wife and I are just focusing our attention on, okay, what do we have? What's here right now? And what we do have is a whole bunch of young, willing, excited junior leaders that want to be part of a church, which is just an exciting thought in itself. And so how do we grow what we have currently to help us operate in a bigger function? And so the biggest thing we've learned right now is utilizing what you have in front of you instead of waiting for God to put the answer you've been praying for right in front of you. Just use what you have.
That's so good. Man, we're already getting into the deep stuff. That's really, really good. I think that's something that's vital for each of us to focus on what we have and what God has given us, not on what we lack. Well, along the same lines is a great conversation with Pastor Justin Beesley of HopeCity Church in Fredericton, New Brunswick. So let's go to that conversation now. Hey, Justin, welcome to GoCast. It's so good to see you, my friend.
Hey, good to see you.
It's awesome. Well, for our listeners, tell us a little bit about yourself and in particular, your ministry journey.
Yeah, my name is Justin Beesley. I pastor in Fredericton, New Brunswick on the east coast of Canada, for everyone that is not from Canada listening. And I guess maybe I have a unique journey. My grandfather was a pastor and my dad a pastor. So the one thing I was not ever going to do is be a pastor. I was going to love Jesus, love the church, but get a real job, make real money, and support the church. But so obviously God had a completely different plan. And I remember being a kid, that grade 12 season when you're deciding what you're going to do, and remember having that one conversation with God, like, okay, God, I'll give you a chance. I'm going to apply to university, and if you've got something else for me to do, then, I won't get accepted to university. And I always tell people, if you're having those conversations with God, you should already know that God
that's so true.
So, unfortunately for me, he didn't answer that prayer, and I was accepted to university. And long story short, finally, I just quit the wrestle with God, and I was like, no, I'm not supposed to go to university. I just believe God's got something for me. And so I started Bible college, and kind of the rest is history.
Awesome. So you recently took over the church from your dad. Is that correct?
I did, yeah. So I started serving with my dad. Actually was in the States at school and came back to New Brunswick and just honestly started working with some of the teens, even still doing some studies online. And really, this is my home church. My dad actually pastored in the same city since I was 2 years old. So,
wow.
So this is all I know. There was a transition out of the denomination he was in when I was about 16 years old.
Yeah.
And so our current facility, when I was 16, really was an amalgamation kind of two congregations more than anything. But yeah, so this is my home church and grew up here. And so served along with my dad. And then he felt season was, it was just time. He always used the statement, out of the Bible, that the Bible says that David served his generation well. And he really felt that was being spoken over him.
Right.
And so we started the process 3 years ago of what that transition would be. And so, yeah, about 3 years ago, I became the lead pastor.
That's really cool. So tell us a little bit about HopeCity Church in Fredericton, and tell us a little bit about its history, where it came from, and you touched on a little bit about the amalgamation, but yeah, walk us through what all that looked like.
Yeah, I always, whenever new people come to our church, in Growth Track, I like to give them a little history and really pinpoint the key, what I say, just key moments in the life of our church.
Yeah.
Because I always believe, even though I've stepped in 3 years, if you're coming from a church that has been established for a season, a long time, it's not a matter of getting rid of what once was. It's building on that foundation. And I believe, I just give so much credit, praise God for those, even those that are no longer living today, that really built the foundation on which we're now seeing God just bless. And so our church is over 50 years old, as far as the original congregation. And the church, in 1980, they actually had outgrown a little building they were in and needed to build a new building. And so they actually moved onto farmland where there was no houses, nothing, and actually built a nice facility in the 80s, building that would hold about 500 people or so. Yeah. And anyway, unfortunately, in the 80s, before you and I were probably paying any mortgages, that was when rates were, 19, 20, 21%.
Yeah, I know. I remember my parents talking about that, and I was like, I can't even imagine.
No, we can't. And so anyway, so the church, still they struggled financially, struggled with growth. As we all know, a lot of times the financial burden can really hinder a church from moving forward. The church was in the building and, 2 years and the roof needed replaced. Well, the company that built the church had gone bankrupt and no longer in business. So anyway, I always just share because some of that history, because I believe it was those people, those 100 people or so that were just faithful and gave and sacrificed when they weren't seeing any real results, except we're taking care of this building. So anyway, that really comes to my story of when I started, my family became a part of the church. And I mentioned I was 16 years old. My dad just facing real transition in his life, denomination. He just really felt he no longer could represent that organization. Honestly, didn't know if he would be in ministry anymore. And this local congregation was in transition, needed looking for a lead pastor, and someone said, maybe Joe Beesley. And so anyway, long story short, they approached him. It didn't make sense on paper or anyone outside to say, why would you leave that congregation to come to this smaller congregation? But he felt that was what God had called him to do. Yeah. And so when I was 16, I always say it was really an amalgamation because our church, the church here was running probably 100, 120. Yeah. And then really the first Sunday that my dad was lead pastor, I was a 16-year-old kid, we had about probably 300. So really amalgamation of sort of two groups of people. And the church just sort of continued to grow. And I mean, we made a lot of key decisions along the way. My dad always led a church that was reaching a loss, was growing.
Yeah.
You know, talk about it now, and obviously I can talk from my season of leadership, but our church always had been that church.
Yeah.
We just maybe didn't see it at the pace we're now seeing growth, but it was a constant growth throughout it all. We ended up building another new facility 15 years ago that holds about 1,100 people. And yeah, God's just really kind of blessed us, and we're just in the middle of it now.
That is awesome. So 3 years ago, you became the lead pastor, took over from your dad, transitioned there. So talk about that transition and how it's gone.
The good or the bad?
Yeah, well, both. It'd be great to
No, honestly, I give so much praise and credit to my dad. And maybe there's a pastor that's getting towards the end of their ministry, trying to figure it out. I believe the success that I'm experiencing is because my dad transitioned so well. Now he's still here. He's on staff. Just it's amazing. But truly he handed the baton of leadership. It has to be a God thing for that to happen. But I've heard some people ask me, and they say, what's that like? And how can you transition well? And I always say it's the handing of the baton, but in any race, the person that's doing the handoff to the next person, they have to let go of the baton.
Yes.
And a lot of times in transitions, that doesn't happen.
That's true.
The guy transitioning out, and he knows it needs to happen, but yet he still wants to hold on to that baton. And man, my dad just was incredible. We didn't talk about stuff. It was just, he did. He felt the mantle of God had been lifted off of him, and he just let go. I mean, I remember Pastor Kevin, one time at Teen Church, one day they had here, and so he really got talking to myself and my dad, talking about transition and just, to realize the little things my dad did. For example, the seat he always sat in church, he moved, and he said, "Pastor Justin, you sit here."
Wow.
I wouldn't have thought of it. That was not a big deal.
Yeah.
But just little insignificant, for example, where he always parked. We don't have any parking labeled outside our building, but where he always parked, he stopped parking there, moved over to the next parking spot.
Wow.
He got out of his office and said, "I'm going to move in this next office." So these little things I always say was just vital. I believe in the church, seeing that truly transition has happened, and people really looked at me as a lead pastor and not my dad. And so really through it all, I was prepared, Kelly. Coming into it, all stats would say any significant transition in a church, you can expect a 20% decline in both people and finances.
Yeah, that's true.
So I stepped into it totally ready for that, but believing that wasn't going to be the case.
Right.
So in other words, I'm prepared. I'm prepared for what could happen, but God, we don't have to be a statistic, which is really what this whole podcast is about.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to be the statistic that's out there. We can change things. And so, our church, we never experienced that. We actually would be the opposite, a 20% increase in everything over the last couple of years. So it's been exciting.
That's really cool. And really, I mean, big kudos to your dad, because that takes an enormous, egoless leader to be able to hand the baton off like that in such a degree, and to let go, like you said. I think that's a great analogy. The baton is a great analogy. But he also handed off the baton, and in a relay race, the one handing off the baton is still running full speed. I mean, they're not tired, they're not done. They still got some gas in the tank. They can still go.
Quite a bit of the race, actually.
Yeah, right. And so he's still running beside you, behind you, cheering you on and all the rest of it. But he handed it off at a time, I think a lot of people hang on too long, or they don't let go. But I mean, the fruit of what you're seeing now, I think is a lot of praise has to go to him because of how he transitioned it. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good. So, all right. I mean, so you're pastoring an amazing church It's growing church. It's a large church in a region of the country where large churches and growing churches are a rarity. And I've been out there, and I've driven around in many of the cities and out there, and I hear from pastors all over the Maritimes about how tough it is, how tough an area it is, how churches don't grow, and we don't get big churches here, and many struggle to bust through, the growth ceiling. Man, what is it that is working for you?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it, and especially as I speak to our region, and obviously I believe God's placed me here.
Yeah.
I have a couple other pastor friends in this area that are leading churches that are killing it, and
yeah.
we really believe this is where God's planted us. We battle on the East Coast of Canada. We battle just the poverty mentality.
Yeah.
It's just as a people, we're talking not church, we battle that. We don't have any real natural resources here now. Everyone leaves to go out west. But what has happened that has crept into the church.
Right.
And so churches just even leaders, it's like, well, things aren't growing here. Our populations are shrinking. How is our church going to grow? Our population is shrinking. And I have families every year that have to transfer because they're moving out west. They got a job somewhere. So, I mean, we literally, when our church grows, even my dad's leadership, we always said in New Brunswick, you basically have to grow double to even see increase because we have people.
Yeah, and that's what makes your church that's what makes it even more amazing. I mean, you're not just battling, a mindset, you're battling very real statistics where people are moving out.
No, 100%. But again, it's still back to believing, no, this is a God thing.
Yeah.
And I've always said, if there's people, they need to be saved. If there's people, they can be in churches.
Yeah.
There's no reason they're not in church. And I mean, I remember sharing a message once, even here, and probably a couple of years ago, and ended up going into a series on it. But I really just taught about the God of the small. And I was just looking at how God, as big as He is, and we talked all about that. But yet, for some reason, He chose Earth out of the whole galaxies and everything.
Yeah.
And Earth, He chooses a little town of Nazareth, to send Jesus. And even people are like, can anything good come out of Nazareth?
Yeah.
Like, this small little place, all of Jesus, something like 80 or 90% of the miracles Jesus performed were in this little. Honestly, this small little area, Capernaum. And so it's like, when you really look at all this stuff, then this is what I to fight this poverty mentality, God loves to do big things from small areas.
I recently talked to a pastor. It's funny you brought up Capernaum, because I just recently talked to a pastor who just was there in Capernaum, and he said the thing that shocked him the most is how small it was. Like, he says, and this is the place where Jesus based his ministry, and he says it was tiny, and he said it's crazy, but it was very strategic because it was a port. But that's really interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah. So I would say, when you say what's working, in speaking to pastors, it's really just it's leading with vision.
Yeah.
It really is, and because as leaders we get caught into the same mentality as our province, as our region, as our churches. And honestly, and my dad, I will tell you this, Kelly, just along those lines, to see where we're at now as a church. Even my dad, again, I told you, he led a great church, and we saw salvation, and it was growing, and we battled this all the time. But my dad, just probably about a year ago or so, in one of our conversations, we're just chatting, and he actually said in his years of leadership, he would pray. And it wasn't so much a prayer of faith, it was more a question. Prayer like, God, and he would ask God, like, God, can a church in New Brunswick really see salvations every week? Like, is that possible? You see it out west, you see it here, you see it other places, but I mean, like, we're in the capital city of New Brunswick, and we have 60,000 people. Like,
we
Yeah. And so he would pray that, and so now that he's seeing it, and just still in his, on staff, but just that number one guy praying for us, leading us, cheering us on. Now he's living that literally every week, seeing brand new people, not just show up, but brand new people make a decision to follow Jesus.
That's
and
awesome.
It's exciting to have that conversation, because it's like stuff he wasn't sure yet prayed about.
Yeah.
He now is seeing it happen.
That is awesome.
It goes back to leading with vision and just believing, that you don't have to be that statistic.
That is so good. So talk to me about the importance of, our mindsets as pastors. So how do you go about changing your own mindset? Because, we can always look, across the fence and see the greener pastures in the West or in a different city, or, God, you called me here, and I could, if I was in this area, we could grow, we could see salvations on a weekly basis. We could, if I was here. And so we battle our own mindsets as a pastor, never mind, battling what is a real spiritual battle around us, and never mind trying to change the mindset of our people. So how do you go about changing your mindset and expectations as a leader to overcome what you're seeing every day as you go get a coffee or walk out your front door? How do you change your own mindset in that way?
I can only speak to our region, but I believe it crosses everywhere. I just, I guess I have more personal conversations, and this has honestly been in my heart. Actually, a couple weeks where there's a conference we're going to, and they asked me to come do a session, and just in prayer, I really felt because it's pastors, leaders, and so I felt to just really go this direction. I would say this to leaders: change your mindset, especially leaders or guys that have been in churches for a few years, and so they're struggling. I would ask the question: you still have to decide who called you,
right,
and what you were called to do.
That's good.
Well, what can happen in our mindsets? We don't realize it. See, in our region, I blamed a lot of just the churches for not growing. They're just too board led, and they love the power, and they don't want to grow because once they grow, they lose the power, and we deal with that.
Yeah.
We do in small churches, rural areas. That is there, but people still want to be led. And what happens is a pastor gets in, and I believe, all of us, I don't believe, very few. Now, if you were called to do this and you know it's your calling, that's great. But very few of us got into ministry, full-time ministry, whatever that was. We didn't get into it saying, man, God has called me to lead a group of 50 people and prepare a Bible lesson and get up and teach them, Sunday, and then maybe a midweek service. And then I do it again next week. And my calling now for the next 40, 50 years is to get up and just do this Bible lesson. None of us, very few of us.
Yeah.
It's because we felt, man, God's called me to do this.
Yes.
We got into it because we believed God's call was on our life, that we were to be a voice in our generation, that we knew more people needed to hear about the good news. But what happens is we get into this church or get in this season and nothing's happening. And very quickly, I've just met too many pastors that I would say this: they stopped leading. They stopped having vision. They fell into, this is my job. This is just what I have to do. I just got to take care of these sheep. And as long as I take care of them and they like me, then we're all really good.
Yeah, we settled, don't we? That's so good.
Churches. So I would say that is, as far as our region, that is the biggest mindset block that faces churches. It's the churches are there, people are there, but we don't have enough leaders that really are leading. We have guys that are teaching Bible lessons and they're loving people that are just in the fold, but are they really leading? See, our job is to equip.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Our job is to equip the church. So if we're not leading in that way, our churches aren't going to grow.
Right.
And so I would say constantly, ask yourself all the time, what is my purpose this week? What do I want to see happen this week? I don't care where I'm at. I don't care. And if you're in a tiny little rural area, you make up your mind, even as a pastor, this week I'm getting out of my office and I'm going to meet someone at a coffee shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so many little things that just do. I mean, honestly, my son right now is trying out for hockey and Canadian thing.
Yeah. Speaking about hockey, man, I saw you're in a church league or something like that, and I saw like I mean, you're one of the leading scorers on your team, and I was looking at this, I was like, man, this guy's this guy's a player. He's got.
I'm getting old.
I quit the church hockey league because I'm a little bit too competitive, and I got into a fight, so I was like, I'm done. My witness is gone.
I've come kind of bit. A guy the other day, we were skating and or playing a game and something. I missed the tip or I missed something, and the guy skated by. He said, "You're getting old, Pastor." I said, "There's no getting. There's no getting. I feel old playing hockey." And it was a bunch of 19, 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
So, but I just what I was saying is my son's trying out for hockey, and I could care less. I mean, sure, there's every one of us. Yeah, we want. Actually, the biggest thing, we don't want our kid to hear no.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But I told my son, and we knelt down. My son's 9 years old, and I said, "Brother, when we're doing our prayer time," and he was saying how he'd really like to make the team, and I said, "Well, man, we just need to pray." And I said, let's just pray that whatever team you're on, that it's who God wants us to be with. I said, because there's some friends that you'll end up playing with. So who can we be an influence on?
That's good.
And I said, even for me as a parent, like what parents am I supposed to connect with this year?
Yeah.
Last year, just so, I mean, here I'm leading this church, but I still constantly am trying to think that way.
Yeah.
This year, a guy on my son's hockey team, and just one parent in particular, I just felt, just sort of befriended them, and I don't want, hey, I'm a pastor, and they don't have a clue, I'm just doing life, but I just felt in particular this one father and family, and started praying, and anyway, then towards the end of the year, we do a big day, actually around Father's Day, and so finally after a year of hockey season, and it was the start of baseball season, and our boys ended up on the same team.
Okay,
so. I actually coached hockey, so it was harder to interact all the time. But we're standing there the first game, and he starts asking, really more in depth, like, so you're a pastor, aren't you? And I said, yeah, pastor of church. And, he had no idea about stuff or the size of our church. And, I just kind of starts asking. And then I said, well, man, we actually have a big day coming up, a Father's Day event. I said, you'd love it, man. And he's just he's like, my wife might like something like that. And, well, man, you guys need to come out. And so just invited them, and sure enough, they showed up, on Father's Day. And of course, then he was just he was expecting, one thing when he said, yes, I'll go to a church. When he came in, he was just couldn't get the smile off his face. Like, this place is amazing. Like, this is just, pumping, and he didn't have any of the church language to use. That they were great, and they're now that family. The kids went to summer camp, and they're here in our church now. But it's no matter where you are, you've got to remind yourself all the time who called me, and what am I to do. And so it's not a matter of changing mindset. It's just going back to what the mindset was at the beginning.
That's so good.
Ourselves.
I love what you said about settling, and I mean that really speaks to what Jesus was addressing in the parable of the talents, right? And saying, hey, don't just settle and saying, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to produce, because built inside of each one of us is this desire to get fruit, to grow. I mean, that's inside each one of us. That's placed there by God. We're meant to bear much fruit. Jesus prayed that for his disciples. And when we hit a roadblock after a while, we tend to settle, and we bury our own talent, and we just settle, and we're going, well, and I've heard many pastors saying, I'm just happy with my small congregation and giving a weekly lesson and doing this thing. And it's like, no, we need to shake that mindset or that tendency to settle in each one of us, but also we need to shake that in our church, which you also spoke to about leading that. And then you gave a great example of you leading that. I mean, not only are you telling the church what to do, man, you're inviting, and you're in, speaking to people that are unchurched, and mixing and mingling with people that are unchurched, and then inviting them to church and seeing their lives change. So that's so awesome.
We have to do it as pastors.
Yeah.
The whole world is church people.
Yeah.
Like, we have to be deliberate, and, okay, what am I doing? Where am I going? I mean, we referenced hockey, but our league, I actually started the league when I was probably 20 years old, and it was a church league.
Yeah.
and it was like those days where, guys wanted to be really strict. Well, they got to be church members and they got to,
Yeah.
I was like, this is not a church league. This is a Christian league. Like, we're still going to, try to show each other a little more respect than maybe just the city league. And but like, we want everyone to know they're welcome. And technically we're now the only church team in the league.
Wow.
And it's just a bunch of kids from the community, that are putting teams in and coming, and we're just called the Christian League. And it's great because we are the church now pretty well that's represented there. And so even guys in the league are always just, the only church they really know now is Hope City. But just all the time saying, no, we're here for people that aren't here yet. I'll tell you this, not in our notes or anything. I had a business guy the other day, he called me, and he was driving, and he said, man, he said, I got a question for you. He said, I'm driving, my mind's going. I was like, well, hey, what's your question? And I think I was in a store or something. And he said, with your organization, he said, who's the customer? And I said, and honestly, I didn't even hesitate.
Yeah.
And I said, well, man, I said, I'm a little different than most organizations. I said, we're a church. I said, the customer for me is the people that aren't here yet.
Yeah.
That's my customer. I said, every person that is not here yet, that's my customer.
That's so
and he's a Christian guy, and he said, that's it. He said, so many churches, he said, they think the customer is the people that are in the seats.
Yeah.
I said, no. I said, my prayer, my goal at our organization is that our customers come, and as soon as they come, they become an owner, and now as an owner, they know who the customer is.
Yeah.
And so it's always leading in that way, and just that mindset all the time is, guys, we are here for people that are not here yet.
That is awesome. And that really is equipping the saints to do the work of the ministry and saying, hey, the ministry is to the customers who aren't here yet. So that's so good. I love that. So how many salvations did Hope City see last year?
Yeah, everyone's different, Kelly. I'm actually a guy that I struggle with this, and it's awesome the guys that count it every week. I actually don't count salvations.
Okay.
That's just me personally. As far as, every week we have people. There's not been a week since I'm a lead pastor that we haven't, because every weekend we give people an opportunity. Let us know. Yeah. I mean, I have 2 or 3 that let me know every week, so I don't count them. But every week, there's never been a week that a new person hasn't responded and indicated. Should we count it? Maybe we should. We just never have. So I just tell people we've had a minimal of at least a person every week for the last 3 years, and a lot of weeks, numerous people. We really, the numbers I do track, we would, which was neat when you said, the stat says that churches are about 1 salvation a year, if that, and Canada's worse. Yeah. So we basically are averaging about 1 baptism every week here at our church. So I looked at that stat, and I just, when I was coming in this, I said, hey, what are our numbers? And so we're right on pace. We have baptism again at the end of this month, and numerous people signing up. And so that is the number, obviously, I know. We run a growth track here. So whenever people ask Christ into their heart, we always say, okay, that you just made a decision. That's just the beginning. You need to get in growth track, and we want to walk with you and give you steps and how you're going to grow in your faith journey. And so in growth track, we've had little over about 120 or so over the last year that have taken growth track. So it's exciting.
That's
it's
awesome.
Exciting in a city of 60,000, in a region where everyone says, well, they are. Most of our churches are declining or closing. Yeah. There's actually very few even maintaining, just because what we talked about at first, our population is leaving, and so it's hard to maintain in New Brunswick. And so most of them are actually declining, shrinking, and eventually actually closing their doors. So God's just doing something cool in our church, for sure.
Yeah, that absolutely. It is amazing. And anytime I go out to the Maritimes and talk to pastors out there, I hear about you and your church. So it was really cool that we were able to connect a couple years ago. And it's awesome. I mean, your spirit's contagious, and what you're doing is celebrated, and we're excited about you. So talk to me about what's been your most effective strategy, because you've talked about a number of different strategies. You do an ask every single service. You're in the community, whether it be through hockey and baseball and different things. So what's been your most effective strategy as a church for seeing souls every single Sunday?
I can speak to that. We're an Alpha church. We run the Alpha program.
Yeah.
It's been a great success. But really, even the Alpha program, I guess our greatest strategy would be this: is just we're a church that is a church that brings people.
Right.
We'll use the phrase all the time: be a bringer. So the Alpha core is different. Like if you don't have a church that's bringing,
yeah,
then it doesn't matter sort of what you're doing. Also, we just decided when I stepped into leadership, I heard it said one time that our every day is someone's one day. Mm. And so my church knows, like, if I invite someone, like we treat this, we get together every weekend. We're always doing this, but someone this weekend, someone's husband, someone's kid, someone's, parent that they've been praying for, they said this weekend, hey, I'll go this one time. Yeah. And so just as a church and as a strategy or what, I guess it is, we just have decided that, no, every time we're together, we're going to give people an opportunity to accept Christ, and we're going to be missional. Like, we're worshiping, we're doing our thing, but we're going to give people an opportunity. And so it has to be, well, I'll say it like this, actually, it's more than strategy, it's culture.
Yeah.
Because you can come up with all the strategies, but I heard it said like this, that culture will, trump strategy all day long. And if you don't have the right culture, it does not matter the strategy that you have. And so you have to create a culture that's bringing, but once they come, the culture has to be embracing. Right. That when that person comes, they feel something. They don't know what it is. They just know, like, I've never felt like that before. I've never been in a place where people were so happy to see me. Yeah. So it was just like that. I had one guy, I can tell you story after story, but one guy came in, honestly was part of a biker gang. And anyway, he ended up giving his life to Christ and reached out to me. I actually went to his house to see him. I didn't know all the details. Honestly, I was looking for the hidden cameras. I thought I was being punked. Like, I go into this guy's house, and it's like, he's like, well, this is the first time I met someone at this table, and it didn't start with our phones being put in a box, locked up, locked in another room.
Wow. Yeah.
Living. And I mean, his real thing is like, how do I leave the life I'm in? And, but he said something to me that was so powerful, because he didn't look like anyone you would see in a traditional New Brunswick church. And, he came in and he told me, though, he said, I've been to churches before in my life. He said, I've gone into churches before. That was my first time. And he said, even at the churches I've been at, someone up at the front would get up and say, we're happy to have people here, and we're, that this is great. But he said, at your church, when you got up and said how happy we were to see visitors, he said, I knew it was true, and it wasn't because you said it. He said it was the people all around me were so excited to have me there. Here's the cool thing.
That's cool.
I saw him. I met him when he came in, him and his girlfriend, the first Sunday they ever walked through the doors of the church. I was actually a little late getting up to my seat, and the music had just started. And so he came in, and just naturally, like, even I'm owning the visitors same as everyone else, and I just happened to meet him, and I was like, oh, hey, can I help you guys grab a seat? Just because I was the one there. I was going to run to get the position so where they ended up sitting that Sunday, what was really cool to me, just as a lead pastor, is he sat kind of in amongst a lot of my older people. Oh, wow. Like my haired, my church people that have been around for a long time. But when he told me that story, just as a pastor, I was like, that's awesome. Because it was a bunch of people that in a lot of churches, they would have been like, what's this guy doing at church? And what's his story? And then, like, almost fearful. Because, again, he didn't look like a church person. He's my number one bodyguard now. Awesome, though.
That's awesome.
Good, knowing. So that's culture. So more than strategy, it's culture. And you got to work hard for that culture, because strategies, they'll come, they'll change a little bit.
True.
But culture is that one intangible that if you have that, people will want to come and people will want to stay.
Well, it really is a marriage between strategy and vision, but a marriage between vision and culture. And you can have the vision of invite and be a bringer and all that kind of thing. That can be the vision. That you can chant that, you can preach that, you can do all of that. But if your culture doesn't match that, and when people come, there's cringe factors, and the culture is one where they're not excited about newcomers coming. That doesn't matter how much you tell your people to invite, it's not going to work, because the culture is not matching that. So I love that you brought that up, and that's really powerful.
And I'll say this, that some of the hard things and we've all dealt with it. See, anyone that actually is leading a church that's growing and reaching people.
Yeah.
As you decide that truly is what you're called to do, you decide that is our culture. There are some people that don't get that culture.
Right, that's true.
And as leaders, that was the thing that I probably struggled with or had to come to grips with, is I'm okay if some people don't get it.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Like if someone decides, man, I don't like I like the songs the way I always sang them, or I like the volume the way we always had it, or I understand that. I get that. And so I have to be okay when they say I gotta maybe go to a church that's a little more go for it.
Yeah.
And you have to realize some people won't get the culture. And honestly, I had some people that transitioned away from my church in this season. Over the last couple of years, because they and again, there's reason your church grows so fast, and the people I used to sit beside and the people where are they at now?
That's always my favorite excuse, by the way, is when people are saying, man, the church is too big now. I'm just not comfortable here now. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me how many people we should send away so that you're comfortable. Like, what a crazy thing to say.
At the same time, but what happens, see, this is why pastors have a hard time.
Yeah.
Because we invest in those people, and we do love those people. Like that have been around and have been here. But what happens is, this is the struggle a lot of pastors have, is as soon as there's some, again, that's why I said you got to remind yourself, who called you and what you were called to do.
Yeah. Because
if truly you were called to just take care of 50 people and that's your life mission, then do that. Enjoy it. Have a good time. For me, I don't believe I was called to do that. I believe I was called to lead this generation. I believe the church is the greatest thing in this world. Jesus established the church. If the church wasn't growing, you and I wouldn't be here today, because the gospel would never have been spread.
Yeah.
So I believe the church is to reach the lost. Yeah. But I get it that some people don't get it, but you have to be okay with the fact they don't get it. I love them. I know we're running out of time, but I had one person that transitioned away from my church. It hurt.
Yeah, it always does. Yeah, absolutely.
Every person that transitions away, it hurts.
Yeah,
and I'd actually walked. This one hurt more than most, because I'd actually walked through a lot of stuff with them before I was lead pastor. Like, we're talking tragedy, crazy stuff. Honestly, I'll be honest. If there was someone that I thought would never ever transition away from my church, would be them, just because of what we walked through with them. So it did, on a personal level. Out of any transitions, that one affected me the most. But here's the crazy thing. I mean, once I got through that and spend my time with God, and I'm still focused more on the people that are coming that don't know Jesus. Like, that family knows Jesus, and maybe where they end up getting established or planted now, they'll get re-energized, and so you believe on them. So anyway, this this lady, I hadn't seen her, and run into her in the gym.
Yeah.
And she's leaving, and I said, hey, how are you? And she's like, oh, give me a hug. Like, she was just so excited to see me. I'm just like, this is like, honestly, I was expecting a little more awkwardness.
Yeah.
And she was just like, how are you doing? How are you really doing? I said, hey, I'm doing, things are going good. And she said, no, but really, how are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm doing good. And she said, well, you know what? She said, all I know is you're leading a great church and people are getting saved, and that's what it's all about. So I'm like, you know what? Here's someone that transitioned away, but yet I believe God's still, kind kind of help them come to healing, and they're just, so you have to realize as a leader, I'm still called to lead a church that's reaching the lost. Some people might not totally get the culture. They might not get it, but there are great people, and they'll find their place. There's some people transition away and transition back. There's all of that. But anyway.
That's awesome. That's like what Andy Stanley says, and I think it's so fitting to close this way, but focus on who you're trying to reach more than on who you're trying to keep. I love that, and it's obvious that you're doing that. This has been so good. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Where can our listeners connect with you online and learn more about Hope City and follow you on Instagram?
Obviously our church website, myhopecity.cc.
Yeah.
Me personally, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Justin Beesley, Instagram, Justin_Beesley. If they want to go there and kind of have some people help me out in those areas, make sure I'm always trying to interact with people. So
that's awesome. Sure. Well, thank you so much. This has been so good, and we're excited for what God is doing in the Maritimes and in Fredericton and with Hope City. And thank you so much for coming on the program, man. This has been awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
All right, welcome back, everyone. And that was a great conversation with Justin. I told you he was inspiring. Every time where I first met Justin was actually at a conference, and we were in arranged seating. We were at this conference. Pastors were told to seat, and we were seated right beside this young couple, and it was Justin and his wife, an amazing couple. And it was in the States, this conference, and all of a sudden we found out we're both Canadians and started talking, and we just hit it off right there. And he's a great guy. Have learned so much from him, and great preacher. If you haven't checked him out, you got to check him out online, because he's a great communicator in that regard, as you have seen. So what's one thing that in the conversation that really stood out to you?
I think I was hooked from the beginning when he was talking about transitions, and just as much as when we're handing off the baton, as the person handing off absolutely has to let go for the transition to be a healthy one. So many times in transitions, the person who is letting go of the baton isn't willing to fully loosen their grip yet at that point. And so it could cause a lot of frustrations in the responsibility authority angle, so when he said like the leader needs to completely let go and just trust that whoever's grabbing the baton next can run full force with it, I think that was really powerful.
Yeah, and our level of respect for his dad and being able to do that goes way up when you get a leader that's willing to trust and to let go and to allow, even though there's going to be changes that I'm sure he didn't agree with or wouldn't have done, yet allowed Justin to be able to do that and see the fruit. And sometimes, even if it's not right, you can learn from mistakes that way.
Right. And it was even small things. So when his dad decided to finally let go, he even like changed the subtle things about like where he sat on Sunday morning and gave the seat over to his son. It was like the little small things where it just showed honor and just reflecting that he was willing to just step aside and allow his son to step in and do things. So
I love that. That's amazing leadership and such great lessons for all of us to learn. And we have many other lessons to learn on GoCast as well. I love these conversations because there's so much I get to learn while even doing the interviews and for people inspiring and going, man, I'm taking notes too. But it's so good. So where can people find us on GoCast?
So absolutely. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or even our website at www.gocast.ca.
Yeah, please do. We want you to be a part of the conversation, not just listening along. We would love to continue that conversation with you. So join us on those social medias and on the website as well. Next week, we have a great conversation with my friend, Pastor John Albiston, who has worked alongside of us here at the church, but is now heading up at the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada. He's one of the vice, I don't know what his title is, but he's basically one of the vice presidents of the Alberta and Northwest Territories region. And he travels around encouraging churches and teaching churches and training churches on how to reach out and how to grow and how to transition for success and moving forward. It's a great conversation. Yes. So here's a little snippet of that conversation with Pastor John Albiston.
It's bait that catches fish, not wishful thinking.
Yeah.
So same thing, if we're going to be fishers of men, how are we baiting the hook? So the churches that are succeeding are thinking, okay, are we baiting the hook for ourselves, which is like a fisherman who starts putting sandwiches on his fishing hook.
Yeah.
No, it's not about our preferences, what's going to reach my community. So whether it's our social media, our website, our exterior signage, how we treat people in the parking lot, the front door, the lobby, the welcome, the music, the message. Like we're thinking about people other than ourselves. Again, this is ultimately, we're just taking the golden rule and the Great Commission and putting them together.
Right.
That I'm laying down my preferences and I'm trying to connect with you.
All right, you're not going to want to miss next week's conversation with Pastor John Albertson. So join us same time, same place on GoCast. And also remember, season 2 is coming as we dive into what the church is going to look like post-COVID. And there's lots of changes that are happening. And so how can you and your church adjust to that? You're not going to want to miss great conversations. Season 2 begins March 1st. We'll see you next time. God bless.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of GoCast. We hope you feel inspired and better equipped to take your community for Christ. Make sure to subscribe to receive each new episode as it's released. Let's go and break the stat together.